And we're back. Greetings, everyone. This is Lucian Vâlsan, broadcasting from Cluj-Napoca, Transylvania. As always, alongside with me is Jon Gunnarsson, broadcasting from Deutschland, and our producer James Huff, broadcasting from the States, making sure everything works just fine, and hopefully we'll fix his voice by the time we reach the bonus story. Hi there, Jon.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I don't know if James got around to fixing it on all venues, but this is episode number 145, not 144. Resigning for reasons of mansplaining.
Yeah, I fixed it everywhere.
Oh, yeah, you did?
Of course I did.
20 minutes ago it wasn't, so please excuse me. So, yeah, other than that, I'm still a bit annoyed about the fact that I had to run, literally run, to be here on time because someone just decided that someone that should have come to visit me, 6 days ago, and I've been begging him in the last 6 days to come and visit and settle the issue, and he decided to come just now, 10 minutes before showtime. So yeah, I had to run to get back here in time. Other than that, oh yeah, and nice weather. We just had fabulous weather.
Yeah, it's been mostly good here. It was one day where it was raining and lots of wind and so on, but for the most part, it's been quite good.
No rain, and 20 degrees during daytime, 12 during night, plus 12. Fantastic. I've been looking forward for this kind of weather for 3.5 months now.
Yeah, it's not quite that warm in Germany. It's maybe like 5 degrees, maybe 10 on a good day, but yeah, it's still better than what we used to have the last couple of months.
At least it isn't bloody freezing, and you don't have to feel the effects of feminist snow plowing. All right. So let's get this started. It's not really a tremendously long news section, but nevertheless, it's a lot of silliness. I feel that this week's news section is almost entirely the silly place. I mean, it just is. I mean, there's nothing serious. So, starting with the first one, the Royal Air Forces to ban women from wearing skirts on parades so transgender personnel don't feel excluded, coming from the Daily Mail. The RAF has banned servicewomen from wearing skirts on parade so that transgender personnel don't feel excluded. The MOD has taken the stance on uniform after an increase in trans recruits, and it hopes that the move will show it is a modern and inclusive force. However, the decision has been slammed by servicewomen as political correctness gone mad. Under the new plans, women will be ordered to wear trousers on parades, that's pants for Americans, on barracks and during public events, reports The Sun. It is believed the ban was discussed at a meeting of RAF top brass, but the ban has yet to be enforced. An RAF source said, quote, "It's about including people and encouraging diversity by forcing everyone to dress the same." One furious servicewoman fumed, "Everyone's livid. We've been wearing skirts since World War II. It feels like political correctness. The world's going mad," close quote. While Colonel Richard Kemp, former commander of British forces in Afghanistan, also slammed the ban. He told The Sun, quote, "There are obviously too many people in the Royal Air Forces with too little to do if they have time to agonize over whether or not women should wear skirts in ceremonial uniform," close quote. Told you, the whole news section, almost all of it is silly place.
I mean, that article basically comments itself. I mean, what do you even have to say here?
Yeah, I still don't understand why any military organization, whether it's the Royal Army, Royal Air Force, or whatever, why do they have to show that they're modern and inclusive? I mean, isn't the purpose of military organizations to be, efficient at being, at doing war? They're war machines. Why do they have to be modern and inclusive? Where is that in the mission statement of the Royal Air Forces? I mean, I must have missed it. Admittedly, when I studied about the Royal Air Forces, it was still just communism had just fallen. It was 92 or 93 when I was practicing my my military vocabulary in English. So that's when I read about the Royal Air Forces. But I don't remember reading anything about being inclusive or modern. It was all about, but maybe it has changed. I mean, it's been 25 years since that happened, since I read about it. So maybe it has changed. But I don't remember reading anything about being inclusive or modern. It was modern in the sense of, military hardware being used. But modern in a social sense, no, they they didn't seem to care about that.
Ultimately, a military is an organization for killing people, and it's not about some sort of social club where you can be inclusive, and it's all about showing diversity and holding hands and singing "Kumbaya." It's about killing people, and
Yeah, there's no way to be modern about that.
yeah.
You can get more efficient at killing people, but modern,
Yeah, it's just.
But you can get inclusive. You can kill everyone instead of differentiating. So see, you can be inclusive. Does that?
I'd actually rather like my military to be very discriminating in what kinds of people it kills.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Amazing, amazing. All right, let's go to the next one, which is equally silly.
Next one is from the Daily Mail. Theresa May's top security advisor quits after being accused of mansplaining to the PM and annoying Donald Trump. Theresa May's top security advisor has quit after being accused of mansplaining to the Prime Minister and irritating Donald Trump. Sir Mark Lyle Grant has resigned as Mrs. May's national security advisor after less than 2 years in the role. The resignation comes after Sir Mark was accused of mansplaining or talking in a condescending manner to women by multiple sources at Number 10. The source said the Oletonian, who was a UK ambassador to the UN before taking over the National Security Advisor role, spoke over Prime Minister during a meeting at Downing Street. It is also claimed that Sir Mark did not hit it off with President Donald Trump during a recent visit to Washington and robbed the leader with his manner. Mrs. May said, "I would like to thank Mark Lyle Grant for his long years of public service in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office at the United Nations and also in particular for his work since 2015 as National Security Advisor. Mark has made a huge contribution and I wish him every success for the future." The 60-year-old will be replaced by Mark Sedwill, the permanent secretary in charge of the Home Office, who has worked alongside Mrs. May before. The Prime Minister said, "Mark Sedwill's experience means that he is ideally qualified to take up the critically important role of National Security Advisor. As well as his recent time in the Home Office, he has served in both Afghanistan and Pakistan and has a wide-ranging experience of foreign and security policy issues." Sir Mark's resignation is the latest in a substantial list of key officials to leave their posts since Mrs. May took power. They include Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, who is cutting short his tenure, EU Ambassador Sir Evan Rogers, and Treasury Advisor Jim O'Neill.
In addition to being retarded to resign for reasons of mansplaining, which I used it as a clickbait to put it in the show title, this particular resignation should not be put in the same context with the others. I mean, the EU ambassador resigned because the position was about to be abolished altogether because the UK is soon no longer going to be in the EU. The Treasury advisor resigned because he was a Cameron appointee and had an entirely different vision, and there was a need to put in a pro-Brexit Treasury advisor. I mean, it's not in the same context. I mean, it's the latest in a substantial list of key officials. Yeah, but they're entirely different reasons for why they leave. I mean, it's not the same thing. Now, on to the substance of the thing. Really? I mean, really? I can understand why someone would be, because let's be clear, these things aren't resignations. They're "you're fired" type of resignations. Yep. I can understand why you would fire any advisor, national security or whatever, after that particular advisor has pissed off the President of the United States. Now, I can understand that. I'm less keen in being charitable with with firing your advisor for mansplaining. Really?
Yeah, of course the question is, what did he actually do? The thing is that this term mansplaining is being used so widely It basically just means like disagreeing with a woman. So we don't actually know what he did. Maybe he did indeed talk condescendingly to Mrs. May on several occasions, and then it is perhaps reasonable to fire him for that. We just don't know. It's just this term has just been used so inflationary that it's just hard to say.
Yeah, and again, for the part of irritating the president of the United States, if you are the prime minister of Britain, recently going out from the European Union, having some problems at home with some what lefties like to describe political instability, which is not really political instability, but perception is everything in politics, and public opinion is everything. You want to be in very good relations with the president of the United States, and one of your advisor pissing off the president of the United States is not really a good thing. So I can understand firing an individual over that, but nevertheless, it's very interesting that that this particular word and this particularly cancerous concept has climbed so fast all the way up to the Downing Street. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's just such a cancerous word, as you put it rightly. It's, I mean, there is like some substance to it. You shouldn't talk condescendingly to people, but why do we have to put this word "man" in there? Why does it have to just be something that's specific to men? Perhaps I'm not sure about this, but perhaps it is true that men engage in this behavior more often. Maybe. But even if that is the case, still it doesn't justify using this kind of word. It's just used to be like deliberately offensive and just sort of to wear your misandry proudly and openly, and
it's also used as a conversation ending, basically, because now we cannot ask, okay, but what did he actually do? I mean, and no, he mansplained doesn't count, doesn't cut it as a reasonable explanation.
Yeah, but we already have the word condescension. That's a perfectly fine word, a perfectly useful word that could be used in situations where quote unquote mansplaining is actually a problem. But the way it is used here is just sort of as a sort of all-purpose argument against men saying anything that disagree with a woman, and it's just one of these sort of culture war terms that are very light on substance, and it's just all about signaling your ideology, and it's just a word that just shouldn't exist.
Yep.
I mean, I've offered this comparison before on the show. So in Germany, we have this stereotype that Polish people are quite likely to be thieves. So based on that, we could introduce the word Pole stealing for someone who steals something while being Polish. And then when then we could say no, it's not anti-Polish, it's not anything like that. It's just no, we're just taking this concept that Poles may be more likely to steal things, and therefore this word is perfectly justified. No, it's bullshit. It would be a very offensive word, and Poles would be rightfully annoyed with you using that word, and it serves no purpose because you already have a perfectly good word, but it's just stealing. So it's not necessary, and for the same reason, the word mansplaining is offensive and useless for any sort of productive conversation.
Yeah, but you see, Poles are white, so it's okay to offend them. A much more apt analogy would be pack raping, as in Pakistani rapist. Now that would get everyone's knickers in a twist. Pole stealing, don't give them ideas. There might be enough people who would accept that as a very, very valid concept. Just saying. All right, let's go to the next one, which is amongst the few stories that are serious. All right, coming from The Guardian, but it's about Sweden. Sweden to reintroduce conscription amid rising Baltic tensions. Sweden has voted to reintroduce military conscription by July the 1st after struggling to fill army ranks on a voluntary basis, citing increased Russian military activity in the Baltics as one of the reasons for the policy U-turn. In 2010, Sweden's center-right government at the time abolished the draft after more than 100 years, arguing that targeted recruitment would increase the quality of a military that had shrunk by more than 90% since the end of the Cold War. But with unemployment rates having returned to pre-2012, 2008 levels, the country has been struggling to meet its target of 4,000 new recruits per annum. On Thursday, the Social Democrat Green coalition government voted to adopt measures recommended in a report last September, which we covered on this show, which mean that about 100,000 male and female teenagers born between 1999 and 2000 will soon be asked to complete questionnaires for recruitment. Of the targeted age group, 13,000 will be called to take part in an enrollment process, of which about 4,000 a year will be selected for basic military training in 2018 and 2019. The defense minister said the move was in response to a deteriorating security environment in Europe. We are in a context where Russia has annexed Crimea, Peter Hultqvist, the minister told Agence France Presse. They are doing more exercises in our immediate vicinity. We saw that our units could not be filled on a voluntary basis. A decision had to be taken to complement the volunteer system, which is why we are reactivating the conscription, he added. A resurgent Russia and tensions over Ukraine have prompted politicians to consider bolstering military capability whilst addressing this shortfall of people willing to pursue a career as a professional soldier. Okay. The lack of military preparedness has been exposed in recent years, such as when Russian warplanes carrying out a mock bombing run on Sweden in 2012 caught air defenses off guard. Sweden is not a NATO member, but has signed the organization's Partnership for Peace program, which was launched in 1994 to develop military cooperation between NATO and non-member countries. Hultqvist said motivation would be an important factor when selecting recruits. With its reintroduction of the draft, Sweden will for the first time join Norway to become only the second country in Europe where military service is compulsory for women as well as men. It's very important to emphasize that military service is for girls and guys, Hultqvist said. It is important for the military to have a gender-equal profile, he added. Yeah, good luck with that. One teenager, Sofia Hultgren, who turned 17 this year and could be drafted in the coming years, told Reuters that many young Swedes viewed lengthy careers as military professionals as odd and old-fashioned. Quote, I think many see it as something lame, something your father did, when there are so much other fun things to do, close quote, said Hultgren, who is also a student. However, she welcomed the introduction of military service and said she would consider such training even if she did not want to make it a career. I think this can give you a feeling of comfort. Conscription strengthens our defense when we see so much ugliness in the world, she added. The wages for professional soldiers are well below the national average for the age group, providing little monetary incentive, while the pool of potential recruits, primarily former conscripts from before 2010, has dwindled. This buffer is now exhausted, and that leaves great challenges in recruiting, says Johan Österberg, a staffing researcher at the Swedish Defense University. Swedish military expenditure has fallen from 2.5% of GDP in 1991, around the time the Soviet Union collapsed, to 1.1% in 2015, data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute shows. And the rest of the article tells us what is the conscription status in most of Europe. We know that already. Really, how about you just increase the pay? I mean, it says here that the monetary incentive is minuscule. Yeah, how about increase that incentive? That will solve the issue.
Yeah, it's just a way of hiding the costs. Because instead of like being honest and saying, we want to have more soldiers, we have to pay them decent wages. They just continue to pay them really lousy wages, and then forcing some people to become soldiers. And this way you impose tremendous costs on the people so conscripted, which are not as visible to the wider society because it's just borne by some particular individuals. Whereas if you actually raise wages for soldiers, you would have to do it through taxation, and that's sort of maybe more unpopular than conscription. I guess most voters are already past the age where they could be conscripted, and it's going to mostly be young men, and people have usually very little compassion for young men. So that's why it's maybe politically more popular, but sort of from an economic standpoint of minimizing the costs, conscription is a horrible program.
Yeah, and not only that, but from an efficient point too. I mean, they complain here that not enough people remain for a long time career. Yeah, well, forcing them to join to begin with uh, won't exactly be a tremendous incentive for them to remain for the long time career. They'll stay there for the minimum amount legally required, and then they'll get the fuck out of there.
Yep.
It is not like in the and you know what I appreciate about this article, and that's you should keep this tape because I'm lauding the Guardian here. What I appreciate what I appreciate about this article is that they nakedly say, oh well, now since the economy has gotten better and unemployment levels have gone to pre 2008 levels, that is to say things are going moderately well as opposed to being shitty like it happened between 2008 and 2015 mostly. Now nobody wants to take this lousy, crappy, very badly paid job of being in the Swedish military. So I mean, I appreciate that they're being honest here, and then don't try to sugarcoat it or to use the usual propaganda. But it seems to me that the only problem here is one of incentives, and forcing them, because that's what they complain. Oh, not enough people remain for the long career and whatnot. Yeah, well, maybe making it more attractive would probably solve that issue quite fast. Sure, you won't have an equal number of women and men. That's never going to happen. Get used to it. Go back to reality. But nevertheless, you'll have enough employees for sure if you increase the pay. And I see no reason why not to. I mean, Sweden is in a dangerous neighborhood. I mean, after all, its neighbor is a very hostile power. That's not a secret for anyone. Uh, cut back some of that welfare and invest it into the military. I mean, Sweden used to have uh, like the fourth or the fifth biggest army in the world in the 80s. So I see no reason why this cannot be done. It could be done in the 80s. It can be done now, considering that Sweden is much wealthier now than it was in the 80s. So there's no reason why this cannot be done.
Yeah, also some of the language here is I find quite worrying. This what this Holtquist guy says, it's very important to emphasize that military service is for girls and guys. No, it's not for girls and guys. It's for men and women who are supposed to be hired to potentially kill people. It's not some sort of social club where you can invite all your girlfriends and all your guy friends and you can hang out and have fun. No.
Yeah, well, I can understand. Of course, it's not only worried; it's stupid that kind of language. But I can sort of understand why it is happening. I mean, this is the country where a soldier had to literally sue his superiors and eventually win because his superiors ordered him to go to a gay parade last summer in Stockholm. And this guy was like, no, 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 no. I joined the military for entirely different purposes. Definitely not to uphold LGBT parades. Fuck that shit. That's not going to happen. And they reprimanded him for refusing to obey an order, and he worked within the system and won his case, and his reprimand had to be rescinded. But nevertheless, this is the business that in which the Swedish military seems to be these days, in political activism. If you remember that there is an article on a Voice for Men written by our guy from AVFM Sweden when there were the huge fires in Sweden, and even though the budget of the crisis preparedness services had been increased in between 2010 and 2015, when the forest fires struck in Sweden, Sweden had to ask for assistance Norway lended some helicopters. Poland lended some equipment. Germany also, because they didn't have enough equipment, let alone people, to deal with what was they were supposed to deal with. That is to say, put down the fire and because that's not, in case of natural catastrophe, you also use your military internally, not just externally. Uh, as it turned out, an inquiry into that, it turned out a huge portion of the budget had went to diversity and gender awareness training, as opposed to buying new helicopters and buying new equipment. I mean, that's the Swedish military for you. So having the head of the military, the Minister of Defense, coming out, so it's important that to emphasize that it's for girls and guys. It's not really surprising. It's stupid, but it's not surprising.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's kind of a thing we've come to expect from Sweden.
Yeah, someone should make Sweden great again. Amazing. All right, I have a feeling that the next one is serious too, isn't it?
Yeah, the next one is serious to this. It's from the Humanistische Pressedienst. Africans fight against circumcision programs. The 7th of May marks another anniversary of the Cologne verdict of 2012, an occasion which people in Cologne will once more use to take to the streets and to demonstrate for the right of genital self-determination of all human beings. This year, the focus of the activities surrounding the 7th of May protest will be on circumcision programs in Africa. Guests from the USA and Kenya will speak during the demonstration and at a press conference in Berlin. This undertaking will require about 7,000 euros in funds. 5 years ago, the State Court of Cologne judged a not medically indicated removal of a 2-year-old boy's foreskin, that is a circumcision, as being a criminally liable act of bodily injury. In the meantime, the 7th of May has become an international symbol for children's right to self-determination, independent of sex, origin, religion, and tradition. While children's, human, and women's rights organizations, as well as medical associations around the globe, are advocating for the right of bodily integrity and do their best to inform people about all forms of genital mutilation of children, aid workers in a number of African countries have been following a bizarre trend over the last few years. Millions of dollars are spent on circumcision programs supposedly to prevent HIV. In the names of USAID, UNICEF, and the World Bank, untold numbers of boys have since become victims of forced circumcision. While the Western media has been mostly silent on this issue, the Kenyan American research project, vmmcproject.org, with the help of the American journalist Tess Fish and the Kenyan Prince Hilary Maloba, victims of the circumcision programs from Kenya and Uganda, are given a voice for the first time. The results are shocking. On the one side, we have numerous complications during and after the operation, sometimes with deadly consequences. On the other side, you have a rate of HIV infection, which not only has not declined, but has actually increased. Instead of being scrapped, the programs are extended. And since the target quotas are not being met with adults, who are often unwilling, more and more boys, quote-unquote, have to be circumcised to meet the quotas. Mothers are being manipulated into agreeing to the procedure through a provision of one-sided propaganda. There are also several reports of boys being abducted straight from school to circumcise them, enticed by offering them soft drinks, sweets, and false promises. Doctors get bonuses for reaching the quotas. And I'm going to skip the last 2 paragraphs because most is just asking for shekels. So
that's a good news. That's a nice step forward.
Yeah, it's good that this sort of thing is gaining awareness, and just for those not informed, this verdict by the Cologne court was then very soon overturned by a law passed in the Bundestag, which unequivocally legalized circumcision. Before that, it had been sort of in this legal gray area.
Nevertheless, it provided a very good incentive for for anti-circumcision voices all over Europe
Yep.
to start speaking up, because since that verdict, I mean, until that verdict, it was 10 people on the voiceformen.com talking about it. Let's face it. It wasn't, and small academic voices in journals that nobody reads about. These were the only voices in Europe that were talking about. It was one or two ethicists from Oxford University, a few people with a voice for men, Mike Buchanan, and I'm out of people who are talking about it. Since that verdict, on the other hand, we've seen the Royal Dutch Medical Association coming out against it, the Swedish Medical Association going out about it, the Danish Parliament seriously considering making circumcision illegal, many Norwegian doctors declining to perform it anymore and de facto making it illegal in many areas of Norway. Many things have happened since that verdict. That verdict was a sort of a watershed moment. It didn't change anything per se at that moment, but it emboldened the alternative narrative for sure.
Yeah, and it very much brought it back to public awareness and.
As for what's happening in Africa, I remember Robert O'Hara wrote a very exhaustive article about the programs in Africa. I think it was back in 2013. He wrote a very good expose about this, especially about the ones funded with US dollars, the USAID programs. I think Robert at one moment was also a guest at a radio show in Uganda, if I remember correctly, where he spoke about it. But yeah, what's happening in Africa is definitely sickening. And if I recall correctly, I could be wrong, but if I recall correctly from Robert's article, their target was something like to circumcise something like 28 million males within 5 years, so between 2013 and 2018. Probably they're way below the target because I would say surprisingly they've been met with quite a bit of pushback, and it's good to see African activists now organized into more proper organizations that get the spotlight. That's good.
Yeah, it's just really unbelievable that all these aid organizations are spending so much money on actually doing harm when there's so many good things you could I don't know, fight against malaria, for example, but no, instead you fight for circumcision. It's just absurd. Like even if it were indeed true that that it reduces HIV transmission, even then it's very dubious whether it's actually worth whether it's actually has any sort of a positive impact, let alone the biggest bang for your buck you can get, which obviously is not.
Yeah, I was wrong about the timeline. Robert O'Hara wrote the article on January the 4th, 2012, so 5 years ago. It's called 28 Million African Men to be Circumcised Through Massive United Nations Program. I dropped the link in the chat room for anyone curious about it. But yeah, I mean...
And the problem also goes deeper than just these programs by your Western aid organization. It's also just from the locals. For example, if you look at South Africa, it's
yes,
it's a very widespread practice. Circumcision is often done in very unhygienic conditions, and it's not unusual in sort of one year to have dozens of boys die from this procedure. And this is in South Africa, which is one of the more advanced countries in
and where circumcision
Africa.
Is actually illegal below the age of 16.
Yeah, but it's still something that happens.
It's poorly enforced. Yeah, the law is poorly enforced. It is enforced better than it was 10 years ago, but it's still poorly enforced.
Yeah, especially if we're talking about rural areas.
Yeah, and mind you, this is more or less a tribal issue. I remember we covered on the show one article. It was from The Guardian, from a left-wing activist actually, who changed her opinion about circumcision after she saw what was actually happening in the rural areas. A South African leftist, when she realized that boys were also exactly as described in this article that you just read, boys being kidnapped from school or from whatever they were doing, minding their own business when they were 11 or 12 or whatnot, and taken into the woods and circumcised literally in the woods. I mean, and of course there have been fatalities recorded, and also severe cases of permanent damage being done to these boys' sexual organs. It's really horrific. And as you said, the South Africa is somewhat the more advanced, more progressive country. But I can only begin to presume that I can imagine what happened in places like Uganda or Central African Republic, places that are really, really backwards.
Yeah.
And before we move to the next one, I have to just read the one paragraph from Robert's article from 5 years ago because it's relevant to the topic. Quote, in spite of the compelling objections by the World Health Organization and other supranational organizations, the plan is still to execute the initiative to circumcise nearly 28 million men and boys and infants over the next 5 years. The list of stakeholders in the project reads like a who's who on international politic and economic powerhouses. And the list includes the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, Department of Defense, the US government, the DoD, Office of the US Global AIDS Coordinator, UNAIDS Secretariat Headquarters, UNAIDS Regional Support Team for Eastern and Southern Africa, US Agency for International Development, that's USAID, WHO Headquarters, the World Bank Global HIV/AIDS Program, and the World Bank Country Level Health Team and Task Team Leaders of World Bank Health Operations. Close quote. Scary.
Yep.
Really scary. All right. Sticking into the third world related discussion, let's go to the next one coming from The Guardian. Deported gay Afghanis or Afghans told to pretend to be straight. Gay Afghans can be deported to their home country where homosexuality is illegal and wholly taboo, and they must pretend to be straight under new British government guidelines for handling asylum applications. The new guidance for a country where not a single citizen lives an openly gay life has been denounced by human rights groups as a violation of international law and criticized by the Home Office's own Afghanistan unit. The Home Office's approach seems to be to tell asylum seekers, pretend you're straight, move to Kabul, and best of luck, said Heather Barr, a senior researcher at Human Rights Watch. Living a life where you are forced to lie every day about a key part of your identity and live in constant fear of being found out and harassed, prosecuted, or attacked is exactly the kind of persecution asylum laws are supposed to prevent. The document, dated last month, clearly lays out the multiple risks to LGBT Afghans from their own families, from Afghan laws, and from Taliban insurgents who consider homosexuality a crime punishable by death. It also suggests that lesbians and gay men with what may be seen as feminine traits would be at serious risk if forced to return. But the guidance goes on to argue that as the Afghan government has not recently prosecuted anyone for homosexuality and the Taliban do not currently threaten the capital, a closeted gay Afghan could live safely in Kabul. Skipping a bit. This apparently puts the Home Office at odds with United Nations guidelines on refugees, which specify that LGBT people should not be required to change or conceal their identity to avoid persecution, said Paul Tucock, Director of Campaigns, Policy and Research at Stonewall. These Home Office guidance notes on Afghanistan seem to directly contradict this. They openly acknowledge that LGBT people are at risk, but also state that they can escape persecution if they are careful not to attract attention by hiding who they are, Tucock said. This is unacceptable and leaves LGBT people in danger. We strongly urge the government to change its approach. Skipping a bit more, the lack of prosecutions for homosexuality since the Taliban were ousted from power in 2001 does not reflect an increased openness. The note continues, just greater respect for the rule of law. There is very little space in Afghan society in any location to be an individual that openly identifies as LGBT. Social attitudes and the legal position of homosexuality means that the only option for a homosexual individual, in all but the very rarest of cases, would be to conceal their sexual orientation to avoid punishment. It also objects to references in the report of the common practice of sexually exploiting young boys. We are deeply concerned that the suggestion that the prevalence, especially in the Pashtun community, of the practice of bahabazi implies an acceptance of certain homosexual conduct, warns the document signed by the head of the unit. Its occurrence reflects Afghanistan's inability to deal with child sexual abuse and pedophilia. It should not be associated with consensual homosexuality and attitudes towards this. The Home Office declined to comment directly on the new guidelines, saying only that each claim is considered on its individual merits and in accordance with the UK's international obligations. When someone is found to be at risk of persecution or serious harm in their country of origin because of their sexuality or gender identity, refuge will be granted, a spokesperson said. So, it does seem to be the same kind of weird reasoning that uh, you brought up from Germany last episode. Oh, you'll be fine there, because you're a man. And this time, oh, in Kabul they don't throw fags from off the rooftops, so go there. That's basically the tone of it. Uh, with that said, I still have to be an insensitive prick, and I'll have to ask, why should there be the place of a country, the United Kingdom, Germany, whatever, to shelter the non-straights of the world? I mean, seriously, homosexuality is illegal in India, for instance. There are roughly 120 million LGBT people just in India alone. There are hundreds of millions of LGBT people living in places where that's illegal. Should Britain take them all? Should Europe take them all? I mean, where do you stop? There has to be a line drawn somewhere. This idea that Western countries should just take all the wounded of the world is just not feasible. It's not practical. It may feel moral to virtue signal over it, maybe, but it's not practical.
Yeah, it doesn't really work. Thing is also that it's quite easy to pretend to be gay. If we say that, you know, if you're gay, then you can stay, otherwise you have to go. Suddenly maybe you will find there's going to be a lot of closeted gays among refugees.
It may sound insensitive for us to say this, but as insensitive as it may be, think about it this way: you make 20 euros a month in Afghanistan, and work is very hard if you can find any work. Mostly you can't, and you also have to somehow avoid being shot because, well, if you're not living in a big city, that will be the capital in another one. Anywhere else in Afghanistan, you still do stand a chance of being shot just because potato. You don't have to be a gay. You might actually find it that pretending to be gay and kissing a man sometimes here and there for the photos to to create a track records for that sounds like something that you would definitely do if the reward is to be granted refugee status in Britain or Germany or even Poland. For, I mean, anywhere would be better. So this thing has to be taken somehow into account. Yes, it's insensitive, but then again, we don't live in a world with unlimited resources, don't we?
Yeah, we don't. This is why I think the whole focus of these asylum laws are wrong. We shouldn't look so much on who is persecuted and who is not persecuted, but on who actually fits in our society, who has maybe some sort of education, who is at least willing to be educated, who's willing to integrate into the new society. These are the kinds of people we should take, and we should not take people who are who are Islamists, who are unwilling to learn the language, who are unwilling to adopt to local customs, and that's it's not just selfishness, although that's of course part of it. It's also basically in the interest of those immigrants or refugees we let in, because it's also in their interest to get along with the local population. It's not in their interest to have some sort of very hostile population who will be quite angry at, say, terrorist attacks happening in their country, will be angry at lots of people being unemployed, lots of refugees being unemployed. It's also in their interest to have good relations with the local population, to have to be able to fit into the country, because otherwise they even those refugees who are willing to work hard, who are willing to integrate, will be stereotyped and discriminated against, along with the rest of the refugee population. That's just something that's going to happen. Maybe it's not fair, but that's just reality. And
yeah, life is not fair. I was reading recently, because I keep I do this quite religiously. There are two things that I do religiously. One is read the left-wing media. I read Salon and Huffington Post religiously. I rarely let 3 days go by without reading Salon or Huffington Post or both. The second thing that I do religiously is to read forums where non-Western immigrants congregate. And there are a lot of interesting things you can find there. And on one of those forums, I'll have to dig that up and publish it somewhere. There was a guy who recently moved a Pakistani guy who moved to Canada. He's a citizen of the United Kingdom. He moved alongside with his family in the United Kingdom when he was like 2 or 3, something like that. And now he and his entire family moved to Canada. Why? Because, well, they moved to the United Kingdom because they wanted to live in Europe. But now they're the city where he grew up in Luton City, where actually it's a town, is now Pakistan. And both himself and his parents didn't want to live in Pakistan. That's why they left Pakistan. So now they moved to Canada. These kinds of things do happen, ghettoization and all and whatnot. And the more you implement these kinds of victimology policies, as opposed to what you said, looking at whether the individual is willing to integrate, is willing to work and sustain himself or herself, instead of looking at that, you just look at victimology points. Sooner or later, that will end up badly, and not and as you said, eventually it affects even those that do want to work and integrate in various ways, not just discrimination, but other sorts of stereotypification. Go ahead.
I mean, there's many examples of that in history, of when you have when you have some sort of foreign population, sort of immigrant population, and they're seen in a negative light because of criminality, because of bad manners, because of bad hygiene or whatever. It will reflect poorly on the rest of the population, even those who do not have these negative qualities. So, for example, in the United States in the 19th century, you had a Jewish minority, who is Jews from Germany mostly, who were quite well integrated. But then you had an influx of Jews from Eastern Europe, who were less well educated, who were
much more ghettoized,
who did not perform to sort of normal Western standards of cleanliness, and did not dress well, and so on. And that just dragged down the overall opinion of Jews in the American population, and led to quite a bit of anti-Semitism. And the established Jews from Germany were quite aware of this, and they tried to counteract this, and to set up lessons on cleanliness and proper manners for these Eastern European Jews who came in, and this way tried to stem this tide of anti-Semitism that was developing. And were at least partially successful in doing that, but that's a real danger and something that has to be avoided. And that's something that you have to keep in mind. And
yes, but
oftentimes the public in the public perception, these sort of concerns are just dismissed as being racist, and that's just racist stereotyping. You just tell people not to stereotype, and that's it. But it's not going to be successful just to have these moral exhortations. You also have to remove the basis for forming these stereotypes, because stereotypes don't just come into existence spontaneously.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. The difference is that the 1920s and 1930s, actually 1910s and 1920s, because this is the time frame we're talking about. By 1940s, that the issue was mostly gone. But yes, 1910s, 1900s, 1920s, the Jews of that time didn't rely on political correctness. They were like, look, there is an obvious problem within some segments of our own Jewish community. We got to do something about it. Whereas now,
well, it wasn't really their own Jewish community, but it was very, very different kinds of Jews that who did not necessarily see themselves as being part of the same community, but they were seen by outsiders as being the same community.
Nevertheless, instead of throwing shit outwards and blaming everyone else for noticing it, they threw shit inwards. That is, let's identify the troublemakers, throw shit at them, try to educate them, and let's solve the issue somehow, which kind of did work. I mean, by 1940s, the issue was more or less non-existent. By 1960, nobody even remembered it. So it worked. And now the descendants of that population are very, very well educated and established members of the American society. So it definitely worked. Whereas with the let's stick to the topic with Muslims in the United Kingdom, Pakistanis, Afghanis in particular, that never happened. You won't see an established older Pakistani or Afghani immigrant saying, look, there's obvious problems within the new breed of immigrants from Pakistan or Afghanistan. Let's do something. Let's look inwards and try to solve the issue. You'll never see this happening now. All you see is the established Muslims going and blaming everyone else for Islamophobia, because potato. The context is the same, but the methods have changed radically and not to the better.
Yeah, and I think there's certainly some role for criticizing outsiders or criticizing the native population for prejudice. And in some cases, that is indeed true and blameworthy. But it's not a complete strategy. It's not just by scolding people for racism and so on. It's not enough to actually solve the problem.
Yeah, it's not, and I'm a bit more tribalistic than you are, and I'm like, no, it is their country, therefore they get to criticize more. If you don't like it, you can kindly go back to where you came from. When I'm in Poland, I don't go around criticizing Polish people because they believe I'm an Orthodox. I'm not, but whatever. It's their country; they get to criticize. If I don't like it, I can kindly fuck off. So no, this kind of let's scold nah. First you be better, and then have to throw such pretenses and such expectations at the native population. I don't think that what I say here is radical. This was the mainstream view up until 2000, 2002, 2003. It's a very recent phenomenon when it became radical to suggest that no, the immigrants should adapt to the rest of us, not the other way around.
I mean, yeah, certainly the onus is on immigrants to adapt to the society around them, but that doesn't mean that any sort of attitude by the natives should be accepted or should be or shouldn't be criticized.
No, but I provide a lot more a much more charitable attitude to the natives than to the newcomers.
Okay,
Uh,
fair enough.
you can call that bias. It is a biased attitude, but I think bias towards the initial owners of the land is a very fair and earned privilege. There is no problem. Nobody cries racism and extreme bias when Nigerians organize in the streets of the capital of Nigeria because there's too many Chinese people moving in certain segments of the city. Nobody, they're like, oh yeah, sure. Why are there too many Chinese? That's the reaction of the international community. Whereas when the exact same thing happens in Europe, where they say, look, there's just too many fucking Muslims there, and they're ghettoizing, and we feel conquered. We don't like that. The reaction of the international community is exactly the opposite. It's, oh my god, that's racist. No, I think the initial owners of the place get to have their grievances regarded with a bit more charitable interpretations, at least at first.
Yeah, but I would also criticize the Nigerians for doing that. So that's that.
Yeah, but I'm talking in terms of practical politics here, not the ideal world where everyone likes everyone else. It doesn't work like that, and it probably won't work anytime soon. All right, you take the next one, or should I? I don't remember. I don't have anything.
Yeah, the next one is mine.
Okay.
From the Telegraph, university bans phrases such as right-hand man and gentleman's agreement in favor of gender-neutral terms. A university has banned phrases such as right-hand man and gentleman's agreement under its code of practice on inclusive language. Cardiff Metropolitan University's guidance dictates that gender-neutral terms should be used where possible, adding that students should not allow their cultural background to affect their choice of words. It advises that the terms forefathers, mankind, and sportsmanship should be avoided as part of efforts to, quote, embrace cultural diversity through language. The university has been accused of undermining free speech and insulting students and academics by attempting to dictate their choice of words. Dr. Joanna Williams, a lecturer in higher education at the University of Kent and author of Academic Freedom in an Age of Conformity, said that advising that certain words are banned is unnecessary. It is very authoritarian. It is a very authoritarian attempt to control the way people think and the language people use, she said. The idea that in a university people need to be dictated to in this way is really insulting to students and academics. We should be able to cope with words. These words have evolved over a long period of time and they don't have sexist associations. Students are told that stereotypes through language, quote, denies people's individuality and that instead they should strive to promote an atmosphere in which all students feel valued. The guidance, which includes a list of 34 words and phrases that should be avoided, says that students need not be too anxious about the use of language. Blind people do use terms like see you later, and being too careful can make conversation painful for both parties, it adds. It is the latest in a series of attempts on university campuses across the country to implement politically correct policies. Earlier this week, it emerged that Cambridge University students had complained about being served Jamaican stew and Tunisian rice, claiming that the cultures were misrepresented. Prime Minister Theresa May has hit out at universities for implementing safe space policies and concerns that self-censorship is curtailing freedom of speech on campuses. The Prime Minister said it was quite extraordinary for universities to ban the discussion of certain topics which could cause offense. She warned that stifling free speech could have a negative impact on Britain's economic and social success. A survey by the radical magazine Spiked, published last month, found that 90% of British universities have been involved in restricting free speech on campus. It found that in the last year, 21 universities banned high-profile speakers from attending lectures, debates, or speeches because of their views, including Oxford, King's College London, and University College London. According to the survey, more than 60% of universities now severely restrict free speech, meaning they actively censor particular ideas, speakers, and texts on campus. Gender-neutral terms checklist from Cardiff Metropolitan University's Code of Practice on Using Inclusive Language. Forefathers should be replaced by ancestors or forebears. Gentleman's agreement by unwritten agreement or agreement based on trust. Girls, for adults, should be women. Housewife, shopper, consumer, homemaker, depends on context. Manpower is human resources, labor force, staff, personnel, workers, or workforce. Man or mankind should be humanity, humankind, human race, or people. Man-made should be artificial, manufactured, or synthetic. Man in the street or common man should be average, ordinary, or typical citizen or person. Right-hand man should be chief assistant. Sportsmanship should be fairness, good humor, or sense of fair play.
I was expecting what is the guidance on see you later with when you're talking with a blind person. Also, what's wrong with having rice from Tunisia being described as Tunisian rice? I mean, what's the problem with that? Or having rice cooked with using a Tunisian recipe being described as Tunisian rice? What's wrong about that?
I don't know. A lot of times these kinds of recipes or named after some kinds of country is often not actually food that's typical of that country. Maybe that's where they're coming from.
Yeah, by that standard, we should abolish French fries because French fries aren't really that popular in France. But nevertheless, I mean, no, it's just completely silly. Now, I do remember. Now, first of all, I have to object to using the radical magazine Spiked. No, fuck you very much. Really? I mean, if Spiked is a radical magazine, where does that leave the Guardian? or what is called the New Statesman. I mean, that place is really radical. I mean, if Spiked is radical, whatever. With that said, I remember reading a graph of the British equivalent of the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. Damn it, I forget their name. I should have had this prepared. Let's see if I can. No, I can't. But basically, what that particular graph had said, I'll find it and I don't know, maybe I mention it next episode or something. What it found that was that basically there were like 4 universities that were in Great Britain that were ranked as very friendly for freedom of speech, and another 10 that were mostly friendly, and all the others were in deep red, that is extremely unfriendly to freedom of speech. So the article is correct that say most universities, but the proportion is just absolutely fantastic. It's most as in nearly all, basically, that restrict speech on campuses. It's astounding.
Yeah, it's quite sad. Quite a sad state of affairs.
And again, I mean, yeah, sure, Oxford is a private university, so whatever. But there are many of these that receive state shekels, and although we criticized Theresa May earlier, Theresa May is correct to hit out at, especially at those that receive state funding.
Yep.
And then, anyway, as a general point, but then again, I and you probably also we get to get away from the scolding a little bit because we're not native speakers. As a general point, I try to use these kinds of terms. Housewife. I refuse terms like partner. I insist on using girlfriend and house and the wife and husband. I even use routinely the term Negro because that's how I learned it when I learned English many years ago, and it was still acceptable then, and in my opinion should still be acceptable today. I just try to I always insist on making a point on this, on refusing this kind of language policing, and I would genuinely advise all the other people to do the same thing. I mean, after all, these things have power if you allow them to have power on you. It's not like they can arrest you or something for saying sportsmanship or mankind. So the best fuck you can give it to them is to just simply ignore their particular guidelines and pretend they don't exist, because they don't exist. If you ignore them, they don't exist. What they can do? Write an angry letter to you, or an angry email, how you triggered someone by saying the sportsmanship of the mankind? Yeah, no. Uh, all right. The lady Joanna Williams quoted in this article wrote basically the next article.
Okay, from the Spectator blog.
Of course, she writes for Spectator. It's the only place where you can still get some sanity.
The post-fact world suits feminism just fine. We know now that the video of a cyclist confronting a catcalling driver, which spent much of yesterday being circulated on social media and covered in the national press, was staged. Barely had viewers finished cheering on the woman as she tore the wing mirror off the side of her harasser's van, then the truth emerged. An eyewitness told The Sun. They practiced the scene 2 or 3 times with the motorbike riding behind them. You could see there was already damage to the wing mirror. It was loose. The company that hosted the video, Jungle Creations, has now issued a statement claiming that although there was under the impression that it portrayed real-life events, it now realizes the video, quote, may be factually incorrect. The footage was quickly removed by Facebook, presumably delighted to have an opportunity to put its new commitment to rooting out fake news into practice. By this point, however, the clip had already been viewed more than 10 million times in under 24 hours. The viral video specialists clearly had a hit on their hands, and it's not hard to see why. The story of an attractive woman minding her own business, yet having to confront a boorish and intimidating van driver, confirms many of our prejudices. The narrative twist, her rampant response to his misogynistic demand to know you on your period, provides the feel-good factor. Even at the very moment, the story changed from woman in street harassment shocker to fake news horror. Commenters were quick to point out that whatever the video may or may not have shown, there was a greater truth to consider. The Guardian were at pains to have it known that catcalling and street harassment happen regularly. Many women can tell a similar tale to this one, in which they have felt threatened by men in a car or a van when cycling or walking. There seems to be a fear that condemning this video could result in women's experiences of street harassment being called into question. But there's really no need to worry. Over recent years, as feminism has grown ever more distant from the reality of women's lives, it has thrived off dubious stories of unsubstantiated personal experiences. Rolling Stone magazine's now notorious 2014 article, A Rape on Campus, told the tale of Jackie, a student at the University of Virginia, who claimed to have been gang raped at a fraternity party. Following widespread media attention, the closure of the fraternity, and the suspension of the accused students, Jackie's story unraveled. Rolling Stone retracted the story and issued an apology. A subsequent investigation blamed the journalistic failure on confirmation bias. Because the incident supported the pre-existing narrative of universities being in the grip of rape culture, too few questions were asked. When personal experience is not enough, dodgy statistics are brought in to show up feminism's predetermined narrative of women as victims. A survey conducted by Britain's Trade Union Congress, TUC, last year reported that over half of women have been sexually harassed at work. This sounds shocking, but a closer look at the research soon casts doubts in the headlines. The survey drew upon a small sample of just 1,500 women, 52% of whom said they saw sexual harassment as a problem. However, seeing sexual harassment as a problem does not necessarily mean the respondents had experienced it themselves. The most common form of harassment, reported by a third of the women questioned, was being subjected to unwelcome jokes. These jokes were not necessarily told to the woman. They may have been overheard, perhaps only once, and many years previously. Hearing a rude joke a decade ago hardly confirms an epidemic of sexual harassment, but the headlines go largely unquestioned because they reinforce our existing biases about the position of women at work. Promoting the message that women are victims of domestic violence in the home, catcalling in the street, sexual harassment at work, and misogynistic trolling on the internet seems to be the main purpose of feminism today. And facts are simply not allowed to get in the way of this mission. In some ways, it's a shame that the video of a feisty woman tearing off a wing mirror turned out to be staged. It was far more enjoyable to watch her than to read the blathering reminders that this is street harassment, that this street harassment is what women experience every day. It is difficult to project an image of women as strong, capable, and independent when feminism constantly tells us we are victims in better need of protection.
It seems that this Joanna Williams character is a serial offender um, in uh, um, in offending the sensibilities of feminism.
Yeah, a lot of false consciousness there.
Yeah, no. The reason I even included the above article with the university bans because I saw this one when you sent it to me on the email, and I googled the name of the author, and I was like, well, maybe this author, and googled for recent news, and I found this one. I found the one above with the university banning terms, and I'm like, oh, this is a serial offender. This can be fun. But if you Google her name a little bit more, Joanna Williams feminism, you'll see a lot of even more triggering content. Although admittedly it was old, so couldn't include it in this show. But nevertheless, it's a very fun character to watch. As for the substance of this particular article, feminism has been living in the post-truth era for decades now. No wonder they adapt the fastest to to the allegedly new post-truth era. I mean, it's not like it's anything new for feminists.
Yeah, this reaction that she describes in this article, that even if this particular story is false, it's still good to point out this, and it raises awareness and so on.
There's a greater truth there.
The greater truth there, which is exactly the same thing that they also said about this Rolling Stones story.
Yes, absolutely, word by word. Yeah, it was. I can still remember. I think it was on Jezebel, I mean, there was a headline exactly that. There is a greater truth to Jackie's story. That was, of course, after it was already known that the entire story was complete and utter bollocks. Because whilst there was still in the time frame when there was still somewhat of a limbo with non-feminists crying, "This is utter bullshit," and the wider society crying as in, yeah, maybe it didn't really happen that way. It just sounds a bit too perfect. Jezebel was up in arms and calling everyone an idiot. How dare you question it? And then eventually they had to issue a retraction and say, oh, yeah, those who question it, they probably had a point. It didn't happen. But then
no,
just
didn't have a point. They're still misogynists and rape culture apologists.
And 2 days later,
they just happened to be right here.
Yeah, 2 days later there is a greater truth there. Even and the first sentence was just like that. Even though Jackie's story turned out to be mostly fraudulent and whatnot, there is a greater truth. And yes, there is a rape culture on campus and yada yada yada. They just don't learn it anymore. And mind you, this I think that not a year goes by without at least one viral feminist story turning out to be complete and utter bollocks. Or at least a story that feminists utterly support, such as this is an older one, the one with the lacrosse team from the Duke University. Same thing. Feminists were all over that story, and most of everyone from outside the feminist sector was like, it just couldn't have happened that way. It's probably bullshit. And the more investigative leaning individuals in the non-feminist community, they were looking at court papers and whatnot. They were like, nah, it's probably bullshit. You'll see, it's probably bullshit. And when it turned out to be bullshit, they reacted the same thing. Oh yeah, but yeah, okay, this one is maybe bullshit, but there is a greater truth there. Even though, to be fair, with the Duke lacrosse case, there were still and there still are feminists even to this day who say that the court was wrong. Because I don't know exactly why. Oh yeah, because the false accused ones were white, and apparently that's minus 9,000 points or something.
So maybe you didn't actually rape these particular people, but you're still a part of the collective rape of the white man of the American continent and of the planet in general, and you also basically. That's responsible for colonialism and war and slavery and everything bad that has ever happened, pretty much.
Mhm.
So even if you're not guilty of this particular crime, you're still guilty of being white. So it's
Yeah, what I don't understand is why do leftists, on the slavery point, why do leftists keep on uh, giving full credit to the white man for that? I mean, the Indian caste system is what, 5,500 years old, something like that. I mean, long before there was any meaningful colonialist or slave society in Europe that we know of, Indians already were very experienced in maintaining a slave society. Just saying.
I mean, slavery is basically its own civilization. It's
Yes.
This particular instance of slavery of whites enslaving blacks in America. That is a very peculiarly American institution that is just a tiny sliver of the overall history of slavery. And
I would go as far as to say it's a minuscule footnote.
Yeah, and if you assign white people any particularly outstanding role in slavery, it is ending slavery.
Oh yeah,
Everyone
sure.
participated in slavery. Every race was enslaved at some point, or members of every race. I mean, the very word slave is derived from the word Slav.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were lots of Europeans enslaving other Europeans. Europeans were enslaved by
The Ottoman Empire.
yeah, the Ottoman Empire and various other Muslim countries. Slavery is not it's not something
The
that it was.
Eritrean Empire enslaved other Africans. The Arabs enslaved Africans. We could go on like this till tomorrow.
Basically, every civilization before the 18th century practiced slavery. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, in the 18th century,
Or before the 19th century, really. 19th century is when abolition of slavery really began. Like
there were civilizations who started abolishing. I mean, for instance, in Transylvania, it was abolished in like 1730s.
That's true. Also, of course, also in like Europe itself, like the European countries, they didn't have slavery in their own countries a bit earlier than that, but still had slavery in their overseas empires, at least as far as the European countries that had colonies.
Yeah, and it was the French and British Navy that fought literally the First World War before the actual World War One to end slavery. It was a war to end the slave routes and to constantly disincentivize it and so on and so. So yeah, and yet for some reason we still get the blame for it. Amazing. Now back to post-truth and feminism. What's interesting is that I mean, of course, this author is entirely correct, but what's interesting is that these videos still do get to be viral. Now, if we are to look into perspective, they're probably going less viral now than 5 years ago, but they still do get a tremendous amount of attention. I mean, if you remember the girl who made the 5 hours walking through New York or something like that, that one got
10 hours, I think,
or 10 hours, okay, whatever, some hours, several hours, and then she edited 3 minutes from that long footage.
Yeah, it's mostly just people like saying hello and so on, and how are you doing? That's street harassment.
Yeah, that one got even more attention, but since then there has been a slow pushback from not just from, well, we kind of drove that pushback, we in the activated non-feminist community, but over the generally more people are less willing to believe these kinds of stories because and I think that the only reason is because everyone has a mother and a wife and or a daughter or whatever, and they were like, "Mom, do you experience this?" Or, "Honey, did you actually ever happen this to you?" And the answers in the overwhelming majority of cases is like, no. Or in the case of the 10 hours through New York, is like, yeah, someone did say hello to me, so fucking what? I said hello back and moved further. I mean, it's not really a big deal. And this is a very good point that the author makes at the end of it. It's hard to sell feminism as strong and capable and independent when sorry, it's hard to project an image of women as strong and capable and independent when feminists constantly tell us we're victims in better need of protection. I mean, in some ways, we can reasonably make the case that feminism is childism. It's the radical notion that women are children.
Yeah, it's very interesting how they constantly push both these ideas, these contradictory ideas at the same time. On the one hand, that women are constantly victims, and on the other hand, that women are strong and capable and independent and so on. Both these ideas can't be true at the same time.
Yeah.
And it seems like they actually use this sort of contradiction strategically. That anyone who objects to either of these ideas can then quickly be pointed out as a misogynist. You deny that women are victims. You don't believe that 1 in 4 women are raped on college campuses. That means you're denying rape culture and you're a sexist. And if you believe that women are weak and incapable of looking out for themselves, then that also makes you a sexist. In this way, you can basically criticize everyone. Isn't that great?
How convenient. All right, let's go to the next one so we can have enough time for the bonus story. I'm sure James will absolutely love the bonus story. Anyway, coming from the British Brainwash Corporation, the BBC, should catfishing be made illegal? Anna Rowe had a whirlwind romance with Anthony Ray after meeting him through the dating app Tinder. But their 14-month relationship came crashing down when she discovered his profile was fake. His name was not Anthony, and he was not single. In fact, he was married, dad, who had initially used photos of a Bollywood actor on his profile and had lured in other women too. He used me like a hotel with benefits under the disguise of a romantic loving relationship that he knew I craved, says Anna. The practice of using a fake profile to start an online romance is known as catfishing. Now, Anna, 44, from Kent, has launched a petition calling for it to be made illegal. But how serious is catfishing, and is it practical to make it a crime? More than half of online dating users say they have come across a fake profile, according to the consumer group Which. While the number of people defrauded in the United Kingdom by online dating scams reached a record high in 2016, there were 3,889 victims of so-called romance fraud last year who handed over a record £39 million. I call that tax per stupidity, collected privately, and I think that's a good social service. Anyway, it has become so prevalent that it led to the creation of the reality show called Catfish, which is dedicated to helping victims learn the true identity of their online romances. Currently, catfishing is not illegal, and it will never be, but elements of the activity could be covered by different parts of the law. If a victim hands over money, the catfish could be prosecuted for fraud. Someone using a fake profile to post offensive messages or doctored images designed to humiliate could also face criminal action. A review of social media and the law by the House of Lords in 2014 concluded there was enough current legislation to cover crimes committed online. New guidance was also issued by the Crown Prosecution Service in October to help the police identify online crimes, including trolling and virtual mobbing. Trolling as a crime? We keep telling you the UK is an asylum. Anyway, but Anna thinks the law needs to go further. Writing on her petition, she said, quote, "I did not or would not consent to have a sexual relationship with a married man, let alone a man who was actively having relations with multiple women simultaneously. His behavior was definitely premeditating, showing his intent to use women, yet the current law will not find his actions a criminal offense." Tony Mead, chief executive of Get Safe Online, recognizes the devastating impact catfishing can have on victims. "It can ruin a life. I know there have been suicides because it's affected someone badly," he says. "It can affect their mental stability and lead to depression, and the victims feel they can't trust anyone again. I do think we need to look more wisely at this in relation to how it's tackled at the moment." Mr. Neat, a former police officer, says there should be a discussion about punishing the worst catfishing offenders, but he raises concerns about how practical a new law would be to implement. "I really feel for that poor woman, but we have got to be realistic on how far we got and how the police would be able to enforce it," he says. "Let's have the discussion because we can't have people being hurt, and it's something we have got to look at." Many dating websites offer users advice on how to spot a scammer and tips to avoid being taken in by a fake profile. Popular dating site Match.com has a team which will remove unwanted accounts and check photos and personal ads. It also has a built-in screening system that can help identify suspicious accounts, remove them, and prevent re-registration. That's a good joke. Lovestruck has a verification service that can confirm members are single and professional by checking their profiles against their other social media sites. But the advice has not stopped many people being duped. Last month, university professor Judith Lathlien revealed how she was tricked out of £140,000 by a gang using a fake profile. Congratulations to the gang. Honest opinion. Ife Ojo, 31, and Ohuzgen Agbaje, 43, were jailed in 2016 after conning a woman out of £1.6 million using a fictional character. But Andrew McClellan, chief executive of the Online Dating Association, the trade body for the Jesus Christ, they have a trade body for anyway, believes legislating against catfishing would be quote unquote difficult. He says there could be genuine reasons why someone might not use their real details online. For example, if they've been in an abusive relationship and did not want their ex-partner to find them. Data protection and freedom of expression would also be an issue when it came to enforcing such a law, he added. The biggest problem this faces is how do you legislate against someone lying, says Mr. McClelland. The floor is open, gentlemen.
Okay. I'm gonna try to take a serious tact on this. Civil suit for fraud, because that's what it is. I do not see any reason why there should be a criminal charge associated with it. I can understand a civil suit for fraud, but no more.
I can't even imagine. How would it be? The Catfish Act of 2017?
Well, I mean, we already have these laws on the books for fraud. They're already there. So, I mean, you know, and I know in some states in the U.S. there are still laws on the books concerning alienation of affection and that type of thing. So we already have something in existence that works just fine for someone to seek redress if this happens to them.
Yeah, but that can only work if it's money involved. Otherwise, I mean, how do you
Otherwise,
sue?
who fucking who?
Yeah, that's my opinion too. I mean, in this particular case, this Anna character, she basically complains that, oh my god, I fucked a guy who Anna Rowe, who just happened to actually not be that single as he claimed and whatnot. Well, so fucking what?
Well, I guess she knows better than to use those types of sites. I'm really, when it comes right down to it, she's using a private service. She needs to find alternative methods. Maybe, I don't know, go out and date, like walk down the street and get catcalled and say, "Hey, you want to, go out for some coffee?"
Yeah, but she's 44. She's approaching peak.
Oh, that's right. So she's got to load her own profile up with all kinds of fake snippets and cat pictures in order to catch a man. Yeah. No, this is bullshit. That's all it is. It's a bullshit law design, or it's a bullshit call for legislation because someone got their fifis hurt.
I'm actually curious how this particular thing worked. Like he had pictures of a Bollywood actor in his profile, and then presumably they had this sort of 14-month relationship. Presumably she actually met him face to face. Did she not ever think this guy doesn't actually look like his profile picture? Did that never come up? Or is that just some Bollywood actor that just looked exactly like him?
Or very similar, and then he could have claimed, well, that's me when I was younger or something like that. Basically, if you're half Asian-ish and half white, you can definitely find a Bollywood actor that looks somewhat similar to you. I mean, think about it this way: Bollywood is the Hollywood of India, a country of 1.6 billion people. The possibility of being someone that looks somewhat similar to you, if you're of similar racial heritage, it's not really that hard. With that said, what I'm a lot more interested to find out is how did it take you 14 months to find out? I mean, uh, sorry for being so blunt, but if I've been dating someone for a year and 2 months, I tend to already know pretty much everything about that person.
I
And
mean, maybe not everything, but enough to know that.
I definitely don't know they're not. I already know if they're married or not. Let me
Yeah.
put it that way. As for the other comment that I made during reading the article, I really do think that in some of these cases, other cases cited in the article, I really do think that it is a tax on stupidity um, collected privately, and I think that's fantastic. I think the scammers are providing a very good social service by getting rid of the shekels owned by stupid people and putting them in the hands of slightly smarter people. I mean, if you're a university professor and you're tricked by of £140,000 by someone using a fake profile on Tinder, you deserve it. You're a university professor. You shouldn't be that stupid. And if you are, you deserve to lose shekels. Obviously, I'm making a moral point here, not a legal one. Probably what those guys did is a crime, but but morally speaking, I feel no urge to condemn them. I feel a huge urge to congratulate them.
Yeah, I wouldn't go along with that. I'd rather that stupid people have money than evil people. I don't know.
I don't think it's evil to dupe stupid people, because especially stupid people that pretend not to be stupid. I mean, this was a university professor. If as a university professor you're so damn gullible, then probably you don't deserve many of the things you have. You can't be that gullible and still be a university professor. Let me put it this way. Unless you think that university professor isn't really such a big deal. But if that's the case, then let's significantly diminish the status of university professors. I'm fine with that too.
I mean, look, we do have laws that apply to everyone equally. Okay, so use the existing framework. Trying to make things like this a criminal proceeding is based solely on an emotional appeal.
Because you can't have people's feeling getting hurt.
That's really what it is. If you can already seek redress for fraud through the courts, then everything else is based off of an emotional appeal.
Yeah. Another aspect that is a bit worrying is in the first part of the article where it says the new guidance was also issued by Crown Prosecution Service in October to help police identify online crimes, including trolling and virtual mobbing. I don't think trolling should be a crime, period.
I'd love to see how they define that.
Yeah, on one hand, yeah, the definition probably matters, but still, I mean, you got trolled. Boo fucking who? Close the window and move on. I mean, if there was to be a serious crackdown on trolling, that would be the only thing that the police would do. I mean, politicians who draft these kinds of guidances, they seem that they don't understand the internet, as in at all.
Yeah, that's probably why.
Besides, what happens when you get trolled by someone outside of your jurisdiction, which is, the norm.
Yeah, also quote unquote, trolling in real life is not illegal either.
Yeah, it's not. As for virtual mobbing, again, how do you define that? I mean, if we all gather and downvote your video, is that virtual mobbing? And if yes, how do you prosecute that? It's not illegal to downvote videos on YouTube. I mean, seriously, these guys are.
So you allowed 100 downvotes, but if it's above 100, then it's mobbing.
100? That's a very low threshold. I mean, any viral video tends to have 50,000 likes and about 1,000 dislikes. I mean, that would mean again, all the entirety of the activity of the police would be to prosecute people who downvoted. I mean, I can imagine being in a prison and why are you here? Well, I trolled a feminist online. Yeah, I downvoted the leftist video on YouTube.
What? There's a leftist video on YouTube that is ratings enabled? How do you find that?
Usually those posted by the Labour Party, they still enable their their ratings. They disable the comments, but they enable the ratings. Unsurprisingly, they are as you would expect them to be. So I can imagine the Labour Party being busy writing criminal complaints every day. They upload the video and then the next day write criminal complaints. Amazing. All right, 35 minutes for the bonus story. This one should
25.
be fun. 25, sorry. So, go ahead.
Okay, a moment that changed me. Lashing out at a man who opened the door for the newly thin me. And this is from our friends at The Guardian. It was July 2014, Nashville, Tennessee. I was walking into a gas station for a bottle of water when the man behind me stepped up to open the door for me. With that act of kindness, something inside me snapped and I flew into a blind rage. I began screaming at him at the top of my lungs. No! You cannot open this door for me. You wouldn't have opened it 2 years ago, so you damn sure can't open it now. I scowled and stormed away, completely enraged. It was the third time that week that a man had done something polite for me. First, a man had bought me a drink at a concert, and then there was the nice man who had helped me scoop up my groceries after I dropped my bag. And now this man with the door. I know all this might leave you wondering if I had had a rough week, or a fight with my boyfriend, or was in a terrible mood that had prompted me to lose my temper like that. The truth is more complicated. 2 years before this, in July 2012, I weighed 365 pounds, which roughly translates into 26 stone. I was enormous and had been my entire life. I grew up an obese kid, was an obese teenager, an obese young adult, and by my mid-40s, I had ballooned into a hugely obese adult. By that summer, I started a massive journey to lose 220 pounds, or almost 16 stone, over the course of 4.5 years. As I sit here today, I'm literally a third of the body mass I used to be. I'm an average-sized woman who wears a size medium pretty much across the board. And I'm happy to report I'm also a fairly happy, confident person. But that day I had just begun experimenting with regular-sized clothes, and I was not confident. I was uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable with the attention my new body was receiving. I was uncomfortable about new social circles, and I was uncomfortable with the unexpected boost to my career. I was uncomfortable, but I didn't know why. Everything seemed to be going so well. I should have been happy, but I wasn't. And it wasn't until I saw that man's hand reach for the handle of that door that I knew why. And it pissed me off. I had been disregarded, overlooked, and ignored because of my size for so long that I didn't even realize it until people started being nice to me. Until, in other words, I was normal-sized. No one had ever done those things for me before. He opened the door for me because I wasn't physically offensive to him, and I knew. And it was in this moment that I realized how terrible we are as a society to people based solely on their appearance. This realization broke me. It broke me in a way that I've never been broken before. He certainly didn't deserve my outburst, but in that moment, I couldn't help myself. The idea that the size of my trousers had anything to do with the simple politeness was heartbreaking to me. Never mind men actually asking me on dates, career advances, better opportunities, and much cheaper clothes. Big girls get done over by the fashion world. In every pair of trousers I've ever owned, I've been the exact same person, with the same thoughts, abilities, talents, intellect, and heart. I didn't just magically become smart, funny, talented, and pretty when I could buy smaller jeans. I've been in here the whole time, but very few took the time to see me. And when that realization came, I grieved for the child, teenager, and woman I had been, and all she had been deprived of. I grieved for what experiencing that would do to my current self, and I grieved for all the people who may have missed who may have missed her along the way because they were too blind to see her. In that moment of grief, I lashed out at a perfectly polite stranger. That moment changed every single thing about me. It has now become my life's mission to help people realize their true beauty and strength, right now in the body they occupy, this second. I'm a photographer and video producer, and it completely changed the way I shoot my clients, as well as prompted me to launch a second career, writing and speaking publicly, so that hopefully I can change the way we all perceive beauty. I love my ass the size it is now. I love the way I look and feel and the freedom it gives me. I can breathe. I actually love taking exercise. I love that my feet don't ache and my back doesn't crack. My boobs look like two baseballs and sacks, but whatever. They look great in lingerie, and I can actually buy it now. But the thing is, I was amazing before I lost the weight too. That girl had the strength to become this woman. That girl had the courage to leave home at 16 years old in search of a new life. She had the passion to pursue a career in the arts and actually succeeded. And she had a big enough heart to not notice that people were mean to her along the way. People are my business, and I've learned a lot about them over the years. I've learned that I've never met one that wasn't stunning, no matter what they looked like or what they weighed. I've never seen a face or body that I couldn't find beauty in, or a person who didn't possess compassion, humor, and love. Honestly, people are amazing. You just have to really see them.
I'm expecting James to jump into this story because it's his favorite story.
No, he's that's sad. That's really sad. Um,
But also funny.
yeah, it's funny, but yeah, you almost pity an individual who goes off the deep end like that. And we've got half of these fat acceptance individuals saying that doctors are wrong about the health effects of obesity. And I think this is where individuals like this do others a great disservice. And the focus needs to shift from beauty to health. I think that's a lot more important. But you've got these idiots who don't understand that healthy is often seen as something more beautiful by the masses. And no one's going to look at an anorexic and go, "Whoo, yeah, that's a hot piece right there." No, most of us look at anorexics and go, something is very wrong, and we don't find that attractive. So having these 250, 300-pound individuals who stand 5'4", screaming at the top of their lungs that all society promotes as anorexic behavior is a crock of shit. That is an individual issue that can be addressed with a medical professional. When you take a look at the Middle Ages and you look at the paintings of the Middle Ages, you often saw rather buxom women with larger curves. And the reason why is because of food scarcity. So
Being a bit fatter was a sign of wealth and prosperity.
Exactly, a sign of wealth and prosperity, and that was considered beautiful. Today, in today's age of plenty, that's not the case any longer. You eat when you need to eat. and you don't eat when you want to eat. And so the standards of beauty have changed because there's plenty in our Western society as compared to back then. So now you're looking.
So the standards of beauty haven't changed really that much, because what was considered fat in the Middle Ages and the sign of beauty, prosperity, whatever, wealth, is still considered okay by today's standards. It's no longer on the top of the of the
No,
list,
well,
but
whereas they were on the top of the list before, I would venture to say that about 50 pounds less is on the top of the list now. You see what I'm saying?
yeah, I see what you're saying. But nevertheless, I mean, someone who would be beautiful in the Middle Ages would probably still be very okay today. It wouldn't be. It would definitely not be 165 kilograms or 26 stone. It's just.
I mean, to take it to the furthest extreme, what these individuals are asking us to find beautiful, and I mean that strictly on a physical level. What these individuals are asking for is akin to asking us to find someone who has bags under their eyes and with a runny nose beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because when it comes right down to it, we're instinctively rating people by their health and by their prosperity, and their outer appearances are dictated by that.
Yeah, what you find beautiful is not just random. There are good evolutionary reasons why we find particular things attractive and others not.
Right.
Because what you find attractive is people who are healthy and who are fertile, because they are more desirable as mates to produce healthier offspring. And if we say found people with Down syndrome attractive, then we would mate with them preferentially, and there would be a lot more people with Down syndrome. And in today's society, people with Down syndrome are perfectly capable of surviving. They may not have the same life expectancy as the rest of society, but they're at least surviving. But in a pre-industrial society, these people would often just die. And if
most of the time before reaching puberty.
Yeah, and they would usually not reproduce, which is why people who found Down syndrome attractive are on a evolutionary dead end. They've died out, which is why today almost everyone finds people with Down syndrome ugly. It may not be politically correct to say that, but people with Down syndrome are not attractive.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not.
Mm-hmm.
And there's good reasons for that. And the same can be said for obese people or underweight people. They're not attractive. I mean, there may be some, some weird preferences. Some people have, and beauty is in the eye of the beholder to some extent, but for the vast majority of the population, there's a fairly narrow range of body types that are considered attractive.
Yeah, I mean, the trend of feeder, for instance, there is a thing, men who not only like very fat women, but also if they get involved in a relationship with one, they encourage her to become even fatter. It's a thing, but it's a thing in a minuscule minority of men and an even smaller minority of women who are into that thing, for reasons you've laid out. Which is why I would dare to contradict entirely the sentence from the article where this author says, I quote, "I didn't just magically become smart, funny, talented, and pretty when I could buy smaller jeans," close quote. Well, yeah, you kind of did magically become prettier when you could buy smaller jeans. It's just the way it is. It may be harsh, but dura lex sed lex.
it's also an indication of being smart and funny and so on, because um, there is a definite correlation between a healthy body and a healthy mind. If you there are of course people who are fat because they have some sort of medical condition um, that makes them fat, but a lot of times it's because they are lazy, they don't take care of themselves, they don't take time to exercise, they have poor self-control when it comes to eating, and these are all negative character traits that are reflected by being fat. And maybe it's not fair to judge people on that sort of first impression, but that's the way it is. When you look at someone, you see someone for you've never met before, you have to make some sort of snap judgment of that person in a fraction of a second, and then you of course resort to these kinds of stereotypes, which are statistically accurate. That fat people are lazy. Maybe not all fat people are lazy, but they on average they're lazy. They have poor self-control and so on. And these kinds of stereotypes, they are not accurate in every instance, but they're a statistical trend here that people pick up on, and people make judgments on that, and that's just reality.
Yeah, and you can scream back at reality, or you can just take it for what it is. From the chat room, Yum Yum, NetGodfirst says, "Oh well, she went from a physically grotesque to forgettably average, and now she's complaining that she gets the courtesies afforded to averages. It's enough that." No, Yum Yum said, "Oh, she should try being a completely forgettable man for a while, or appreciate a good innocent gesture." I think there was an experiment for that, where the lady that went to become a completely forgettable man for a while, and she needed psychiatric admission after the end of the experiment.
Yep.
All right. Well, that was decent. We actually plowed through it faster. We should have James comment on it stories much more often. All right. Then, with all of that being said, next week I won't be here. By the show time, I would probably be in a subway somewhere. In a subway, as in an actual metro, not the restaurant. So yeah, I won't be here next week, but 2 weeks from now, March the 17th, I'll definitely be here for episode 146.
All right. See you then. Until then, take the red pill.
Take the red pill. Goodbye, everyone.